What's going on, everybody? This is the Reformation Keegan. Today, I got a really cool analysis. We have Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire, the entire compendium. So, the reason I picked up the compendium was because of pure convenience. The other trades of Sweet Tooth, they're not easy to find nowadays, and to get all 40 issues is rather tedious, unless if you just want to collect them for the sake of collecting them. But I really wanted to read this for a long time because I had heard great things about it. Um, a lot of people in Windsor revere Jeff Lemire because he is from the Essex County region, and rightfully so, because I think a lot of Jeff Lemire's work is fantastic. If you've never read his Moon Knight run, for example, highly recommend giving that a read. And it's actually a story of Moon Knight that you can kind of go into, not knowing too much about the character, but still connect the dots. So that's a bit of a Jeff Lemire recommendation. But to me, Sweet Tooth is probably his best work. This went for a number of years, and it told a really interesting story about this guy right here, Gus. So Gus is a really interesting character because he lives in a world that's simultaneously post-apocalyptic and dystopian. And again, that's going to sound paradoxical, but please let me elaborate. So, when something is post-apocalyptic, it's happening in the present moment. So, for instance, if you've ever watched Mad Max Fury Road, that is a post-apocalyptic world where civilization has fallen apart. It's taking place in the present day, and you have characters that are fighting from underneath to get back on top and to gain their own personal agency. With dystopian literature or dystopian movies, it basically takes a futuristic scenario and places it as a form of reality. And I think a lot of people they have a misinterpretation of what dystopian can mean. Dystopian can actually happen in the future and in the present and at the same time. And I think that's what happens with Sweet Tooth. Because Jeff Lemire is taking events that are post-apocalyptic, and then he's taking dystopian elements. And what he's doing is he's combining a world that is present and futuristic. I'll give you another example of this in the story. Near the conclusion, so spoiler alert if you haven't ever read or watched Sweet Tooth, the timeline jumps many, many, many years. And we see Gus when he's a bit older, and we see how the hybrids have eventually kind of found their place, and he is content to go into the sunset. And I think, to me, combining dystopian with post-apocalyptic is intriguing, and it's a risk that I think paid off, because throughout all 40 of these issues, we see how Gus's trials and tribulations are really shown. Because Gus initially has a father who is very religious, but he allows these religious conventions to really limit his viewpoint on life and to limit Gus's viewpoints and Gus's physical abilities in terms of moving and networking. And this actually hinders Gus in a lot of ways because he's not able to fully express his emotions to other people, such as Big Man. And what I think really works in Sweet Tooth is the communication and the dialogue. I think Jeff Lemire nails the dialogue, and I think that the art also complements the dialogue and complements the communication going on here, because the art is very post-apocalyptic in the sense that it has a lot of darkness and a lot of emotion on the faces of the characters, which is a great example of multimodality, as we call it in English, which, if you have never heard of that, it's basically when you have the ability to visually see the linguistics that the author is portraying and the writing that they are portraying. And here, I'll give you another example right here, like this cover right here with the bear. This is post-apocalyptic, but at the same time, it's very nature-centric, nature-oriented. And I think it works for this story because you have this post-apocalyptic world, but it's also taking place in the wild, which seems kind of paradoxical because you would think that there would be more confinement, and yes, there is with General Abbott, but you would think that nature would be a symbol of freedom, but really it's a symbol of confinement because you can be running in the woods trying to escape, but really you're in this prison, and nature is a prison in general, as presented in the story. So I think that works really, really well. One of the things that I also really like that I mentioned General Abbott a bit earlier is not only his characterization, but the way that freedom and personal agency is taken away. And in the world, we have the ability to freely speak, we have the ability to have the freedom of expression, but in this story, that's taken away. It's taken away from Gus, it's taken away from Big Man. And both of these characters, like Big Man has a little bit more freedom than Gus, obviously, because Big Man isn't a hybrid, and also Big Man can physically fight his own battles. But Gus is still a child, and he's a hybrid. And if you are a hybrid in this story, you are enemy number one. But the thing is, General Abbott and the governance that is shown in this story, they want to find a cure for the sick, which is what the illness is called, the sick. And through this mass hysteria, the government wants to find this cure, but they're confining and killing individuals to get that cure, which really defeats the purpose of finding a cure. And I think that's a huge social commentary on things in the world that have happened before and now. Because people in higher end positions of power will do things, one, to obviously make money, but two, they'll do it to exercise control. They will take an illness and they will manipulate that illness in the eyes of the general public and influence their intellect and influence their free will by telling them what this illness is, what it does, and how it doesn't control you, when in reality it does. And I think that is done perfectly in this story. And it shows a huge theme of governance that I think is a little too true. And I know people have said that this is a horror story, and I think the horror story may be that it is a very accurate portrayal of governance. At least that's my opinion. But one of the things that we also get is discrimination. And through this discrimination, it's against hybrids because, in a way, Gus is blamed for starting this sick in this plague, for creating hybrids. But one of the things that kind of comes to everybody's attention is that the hybrids aren't really a threat. It's just they look different. And that's a huge thing in the world, right? If an individual looks different, the other individual is going to take that as a threat. It's very threatening when somebody has a freedom of expression and embraces who they truly are, when against somebody who is either one, stuck in their ways, two, insecure, or three, both. And I think that Jeff Lemire really nails this on the head in the story. So those are all the main themes. And the way that the hybrids are confined is very, very reminiscent to the Holocaust, or Auschwitz too, to be more specific. And we can see how these hybrids struggle. And I don't want to give too many concrete examples because I don't want to fully spoil the story for you. I think if you visually see the narrative, you'll be able, again, to connect those dots for yourself. But it's very uncomfortable. But I think it's an uncomfortability that we need to see and that we need to feel and experience. Because if we don't, we're not going to have an understanding of what confinement is or how dangerous it can be to us and our way of thinking and the way that we operate in our day-to-day lives. So I found that a really intriguing part of Sweet Tooth, because it's not just about Gus gaining redemption, it's about the stuff that is learned along the way when Gus eventually either gets his redemption or dies, depending on how you portray the story. And one of the things that I found, I don't even know how to interpret this, but you have the hybrids running around, running away, and they are almost trapped. It's almost like kind of laying a mousetrap out, and they take the bait, and then they're caught and they're snatched and they're taken away. Especially to General Abbott, who we know will go after people that he is the closest to if it gets in the way of his destiny. And in a way, this is going to sound very historical, it's a manifest destiny. General Abbott will do anything he can to get what he wants, and Dr. Singh will too. And they are kind of in cahoots to find this cure, even though they both kind of go their separate ways, but they both have the same selfish intention. And they both disguise their true intentions by using language to convince Gusser, to convince other people in the story that they're doing the right thing. Because a lot of people, when they're doing the wrong thing, they have to convince themselves and convince other people that they think they're doing the right thing. So there's a lot of social commentary, a lot of socioeconomic commentary, a lot of social political commentary, a lot of commentary is happening in this story, which is why I think this might be one of the greatest DC stories of all time, because it's very grounded, and I think grounded stories are the best. That's why I love Batman and even Superman. A lot of people don't think Superman has grounded stories. If you read a lot of Superman, you'll know that a lot of his stories are grounded. Same thing with Sweet Tooth. And this is why I love the Vertigo titles, because I think a lot of the Vertigo titles, they take things that could happen, like from a post-apocalyptic point of view or even a dystopian point of view, and they can ground it and make it make sense to anybody reading. That's why I love a lot of Vertigo titles. And speaking of Vertigo titles, I'm actually reading Sandman, the Mystery Theater right now. I'm about 8 issues in, and I think one day I may do an analysis on the Mystery Theater too. But for Sweet Tooth, I think this was a huge success. This is definitely going down as one of my favorite comics that I've read. And it says a lot because I've read a lot of comics. But I just think that the commentary and the main messages behind this story are absolutely brilliant. And this is also my favorite artwork of Jeff Lemire too, that is present throughout the entire arc. There's also Sweet Tooth The Return, which I have not read yet. I believe it came out in 2020, 2021, around that era. Or I shouldn't say era, it's actually pretty recent, but I'm also going to read that eventually. Maybe I'll do an analysis of that too. But let me know what you think. And most of all, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2026, and I think we can get to 1,000. So please consider hitting the subscribe button, leave a like and comment. If you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know. I'm going to be doing some more shorts for comics that I've picked up recently. And in the meantime, I'm going to do more analyses, and I hope you enjoy. So, see you soon.